And in terms of approval of the agenda, are there any adjustments or late items? I can see you've both been working on it.
We have one later.
So would you just like to go through any changes you might wish to make?
Hi, Emma. Item 3.4, we've got an updated document which is being printed right now. So it's a,
3.4.
yeah, we're going to replace the document there with a new one.
Okay. 3.4. Okay. Any other changes? Could I just ask, I'm asking for approval of the agenda. Can I ask someone to second? Any discussion on the agenda? Can I just ask for approval in that case, please? Thank you. Let's consider the agenda approved. Do we have any public comments notice? No? Then, in the absence of public comments, let's go to 3.1, which is our introduction. And firstly, thank you very much indeed for... Oh, Fritz!
There he is.
I hope you have no problem with the agenda, because we've just approved it.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Should I sit here?
Thank you.
Yeah, or there's a more comfortable chair if you want up here.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
Please. So I think because this is our first meeting, and I'm thrilled to see everybody is here. Perhaps going this way around the table, starting with Fritz. Fritz, you know, we're off to a cracking start, and we could just go through some brief introductions, because it would be nice for the group to have a little bit of a better knowledge of one another.
Well, so as you can see, I'm never late for meetings. So my name is Fritz de Vries, I'm an architect, and I have an office with 14 people in it. And we do mostly residential, some of it high-end, which maybe is less applicable. But we also do some townhouses, and a fair amount of work that we do, about 50% total, is for the development industry in different forms. And we have really good design team. That I know for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Listen, it's the election period. There is no moratorium on advertising.
That's good.
Robin.
My name's Robin Fenton. I'm an architect as well, so I have my own firm, sole proprietor here on Bowen, and about 50% I work on Bowen and about 50% off island. And I'm also, the other hat that I wear is as the executive director of Birch, which is the Bowen Island Resilient Community Housing. We're a non-profit society established recently, and we worked with Daniel, and we've had approval with council. I'm trying to remember the exact specifics, but I think we've had approval to sort of work together on affordable housing and applying for funding and all those things. And we've also had approval for up to half a hectare site, either on lot 3 or lot 2, which hopefully in the coming weeks will be sort of resolved, and we'll have a specific site that's in the works. So that's sort of my dual purpose here on the committee.
Okay.
Thank you. My name's Steve Elringer. Relevant to what you're talking about here, last 20 years I've been involved in real estate in the hotel business. I was managing director of a hotel chain across Canada with 7,000 rooms. And then I was a principal partner in a local company called Anthem Properties, which still exists today, which invested in the US and Canada, basically strip plazas and condominium construction. I was the largest shareholder in a public REIT called One REIT, which had, again, malls across the country. Currently, I'm a director of a company called Quadrille Property Group, based in Vancouver. We're an international investment arm with offices in Hong Kong, London, and New York. We have about 13,000 rental apartment units, which is relevant, although it's a small part of the business. We also have leased land, manufactured home developments too, called Parkland. That's a small part of the business. We also, I assist, I give them advice, but they don't necessarily listen. My son and my daughter have some property here in the Cove also, so I'll declare conflicts later on as we get into some discussions there.
Daniel.
Daniel Hill, business on island, also somewhat knowledgeable in submarines.
Emma.
Island Community Planner, and I'm here in Daniel's stead. Daniel Martin, who is the manager of planning and development, he couldn't make it today, so I'm just subbing in for today.
Is Daniel on holiday?
Just today.
Okay. Okay.
Roger McGillivray. I've been retired about 5 or 6 years ago. I was a builder on Bowen Island for about my whole adult career. I also was the creator of Belterra and Belterra Co-housing, and I live there now. And I've lived here for a long, long time.
Alison Nixon, a musician. That's about all I can say. In terms of housing, not much. Yeah, that's fine.
Actually, it's great to have a balance on any group. Can you imagine if everybody had identical qualifications? It would be so tedious.
Yeah, well, perhaps.
Yeah.
I'm Maureen Nicholson. My voice is going. I work off island. I teach, so I've been talking all week. I'm looking forward to saying very little in this meeting, if possible. With Michael and Marie Skills, we have been the council champions for the housing priority in the strategic plan, and I'm really delighted to see this committee come together. It's been a long time coming, so thank you for being here.
Steph, I think we should introduce you as well.
I'm Steph, I'm the committee clerk. I'm here to support you guys in your endeavors.
Yes, thank you, Steph. Michael Kale, councillor as well. We've been working with Maureen as well to some extent, albeit somewhat latterly on this file. And like her, I'm really pleased that we're able to get together. Such a broad-ranging, at the council meeting on Tuesday, such a broad-ranging subject. It's probably one of the easiest to get derailed. Subordinate to my conversations hitherto on internet connectivity, which even got more derailed. But this whole subject of housing is so very broad. So I'm just going to say two things. We're going to look next at our terms of reference. And if I could also, I'm going to just draw your attention to 4.1 of the return map, which is the election of the chair. And while I am just sitting here at the moment, having spoken to my colleague Maureen, it is very much our wish that councillors in this regard are not the chairs of this committee. Really, we attempt when we are on a committee not ourselves to be the chair. So we will be looking to appoint a chair. There is no reason why we can't co-chair. We're never going to give the file to someone and then take a long trip away. That is not the objective. But the objective is, as a matter of I think I can speak for more in our belief that councillors really shouldn't chair the committees. This is about involvement of our community, and we should be able to be part of that, absolutely proactive, totally supportive, but not the chair. So we'll be looking forward to appointing a chair this morning. So I'm sitting here just keeping the seat warm for somebody. Okay, perhaps we could look at the terms of reference then. Now, in terms of our terms of reference, it's page 3 on your, the next page on your file. Now, here's the question. Has everybody read this, studied this in detail, and committed it to memory?
I've not committed it to memory.
But I have read it.
Have already.
Yeah.
Maybe I could go around the table and ask if we have any general comments on it, and probably the purpose. I guess the purpose is a directing sentence. So perhaps we could to provide council with advice and recommendations on housing issues to help improve the quality of life, livability, working environment for residents, visitors, businesses of Bowen Island Municipality. That, of course, is an umbrella statement, but let's hope when we're having our discussions, occasionally we can revert to that and try and keep us on track. And I really would welcome any comments from around the table, because these terms of reference, we have a template for terms of reference for our committee structures. And I would just like at this stage, because I think it's an essential opportunity for anybody who has any questions on it, because it is our mandate. Any questions? Roger, did it fit with you're comfortable with it?
It did. I didn't, I just read it yet, but I just sort of took this as advice as to where we will be going. But
Yeah.
and I didn't have any problems with anything.
All I don't think we need to, we don't need to approve it as such. It's been approved by council, but
Council approves.
we can just take it that this has now been read and discussed by members of the committee, and this is our...
If I could just draw the committee's attention to a couple of points. When these terms were being developed, it was really important to council that the focus of this committee be broader than affordable housing. So that's an important point to recognize as committee members. It's for all types of housing on the island because they interrelate. But we're also thinking in the long term for the island. And then just draw your attention to 2.4. We are an advisory committee, and people will, I expect, to come to us as individual members with great ideas for what might happen on the island. And it's important to note that if there are housing proposals, that they should be referred to Daniel, the manager of planning and development. They might very well come back to this committee for review and feedback to council, but Daniel is the point of contact for that kind of keen initiative from the public. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Could I also recognise the fact that we're using the term affordability? We all recognise that when people talk about affordable housing, now this is something of a difficult, some people say attainable housing. Could we just say that for the purpose of our discussion, that we understand that we haven't just had the word affordability here, but we recognise the fact that other descriptors are in vogue. Some people say, well, what does affordability mean? And then there is the definition of that. But we are talking about basically accommodation that people can live in on this island while still retaining sufficient funds for their everyday life and other things that they might want to do. Because this term, I recognise, gets much discussed.
Can I put a push in to sort of add to Maureen's comments? I think healthy community needs to be part of what housing is. And we need to have some sense of consensus of what is a healthy community. Because for me, the housing on the island is very recursive, and in that it's a Russian doll. It models down what the part of that housing that nurtures the community is very different from the control of the housing on the island and the control of the political voice on the island. And that dichotomy needs resolving.
So you could be living in place type communities and aging in place type communities and anything else when you talk about that?
No. What's the core value of the community that gives this community its beating heart? That is the part we need to promote.
Okay.
So you're talking about focusing on the more vulnerable people in the community?
No, what makes the community work? It includes the vulnerable. To me, it's a higher order of someone who lives and works on the island and is employed on the island to someone who's a commuter. Lower down in there is the 25% of holidaymakers who own an island, a house on the island. They should have less say in what goes on. They should be not discounted, but it's a different priority for what keeps the community healthy.
It'll be an interesting discussion.
Yes, it will be. It will be, and we believe me, as we made recommendations, Daniel. Take your point, and that must feature in our recommendations. What you've just said is quite pertinent and accepted. Any other questions that we have on it?
I just would like to ask about the 2.2C, identify and advise on short and medium-term housing opportunities. I just wondered what was meant by short-term opportunities in that.
I would like to think that a short-term opportunity is something probably that could be implemented probably within, if you like the term shovel-ready, within 2 years. Would be a short-term opportunity. If you started now, the chances of you building, shall we say, within 18 months would certainly be a fast turnaround and a short term. And I think your longer-term ones go beyond that one in various degrees depending on the project.
Okay, that's fine. That's definitely not how I read that, but I sort of thought of it as being short-term, meaning like a B&B or emergency housing for somebody who needs something, you know, tonight. I thought of it that way when I read that.
Yeah.
But I can see what you have said, and that also makes sense.
No, and actually, when you talk about short term, if an item like that is raised, quite honestly, then that is a short-term opportunity, and I don't know if it should, you know, as we're in the business of making recommendations, shouldn't be excluded. If that is a pertinent, relevant, short-term and agreed opportunity, and that goes forward as well. And I don't think the language should preclude us from it being inclusive.
Sure.
I think one of the points of including something like that was to help entrench in the committee a sense of there's some stuff that's easy and fast that we might be able to move on, but some other things are going to take that longer length of time to, you know, develop the partnerships and so on, but that we should be open to all of those opportunities and trying to push them forward as appropriate.
I read it in conjunction with B, right? So sustain a long-term focus, and then the next one being identify short-term and medium-term. So it's like making sure we do both. And in my mind, what short-term meant was, are there immediate opportunities, like you said, for a pilot project? One thing that I'm immediately thinking of is in Vancouver, and I know we're not at this scale, but Vancouver did that temporary modular housing at the main terminal, which I think was really successful. I don't know what the timeline was from start to finish, but that's a short term. They got it built quickly, it's there for X number of years, and it'll be moved, but it happened fast and it housed people that needed it really quickly. So that's the kind of, I mean, not at a totally different scale, but that's an example of, I think, what came to my mind when we said short term. So, yeah.
Okay. And let's be honest, I think we will be defining this as well, a little bit as we go along. But, okay, let us move on then to the committee handbook.
So that should just be a resource for you to see how committees go, for those of you who are new to this. Your agenda package has information in it, and minutes will be coming to the chair for approval, and then back to the next committee meeting for adoption. Your advisory and your role, basic information like that.
Yeah. And this is a standard template for all committees. I'm sure you understood it as a municipal council, but we needed to put some level playing field so that we had, if you like, very similar rules or guidelines for all our committees, and I think I look at it and I thought, yeah, you know, that's a good description for someone who hasn't sat on one of these committees before, and I think that's excellent. Speaker series program.
Oh, could I just touch on one thing before we move
Yes,
on
you
from
can.
this? Only because I've been on a couple committees now, although I'm still relatively new. One thing that was very helpful to be pointed out and that we've done on another committee is, as a group, when we make a decision or a recommendation, is to do a resolution, like a really clear, like, okay, we've decided that this is the way we want to go, and then staff will prompt us, and then we'll do a resolution. And I suspect, and please correct me, is because then those are easy for council to see. Like, they don't, I hope they read every word, but they might not read every word in every committee's minutes, but they will see the highlights in the resolutions.
And we're going to ask Steph to guide us on
Yes,
this, because when these come to council and when we read the minutes, conversation is detailed conversation, it's action points that are reported.
Yeah.
So I think between Steph and Maureen and myself, we will make sure, because otherwise there will be no other way of giving feedback to council meetings.
Yeah, exactly. But just so that, keep it in mind that that's kind of the little nuggets out of this. We want to make sure they get captured.
So yeah, there are two kinds of resolutions. One is going to be a recommendation to council, and one is just going to be signifying that we agreed on a point or disagreed. You can vote against, which I love.
Yeah. Okay, speaker series.
Yeah. So what's in your agenda is agenda package relates to the establishment of this committee. And I imagine you've had a chance to take a look at it, and also the attached documents. The first attachment is an updated needs assessment that was done by BC Housing. And it's not a particularly thorough needs assessment. It was sufficient for their purposes, and the bottom line conclusion is, yes, we need housing. That's about it. And they don't need anything more to be prepared to work with Bowen. There's also a summary of this chart on page, whatever it is, 29, 28, that gives census data. It's page 28. So this is a summary of the census data from 2001 to 2016, and it shows the change in population, the change in the number of total private dwellings, and breaks it down in terms of the private dwellings that are occupied year-round, so they're primary dwellings, and those that are not occupied year-round, and also includes the number of rentals. The bottom line conclusion that you reach when you sort of pore over the census data is that yes, we've grown. Yes, the number of private dwellings has grown, and from 2001 to 2016, the number of rental residences has been essentially absolutely flat. There's been no growth in that sector. So under rentals in the PDU, it shows we went from, in 2001, 260 rentals to 265 in 2016, at a period where we had 24% population growth. So it makes really clear, you know, where one of the major gaps is in terms of providing housing accommodation on Bowen. There's also some information here regarding, you know, affordability, and you can see that the affordability percentages for owner-occupied versus affordability for renters, they're quite different figures. The last census shows that 24% roughly of owner-occupied homes were paying more than 30% for their shelter costs, as compared to 45% of the renters having to pay more than 30%. And there are some renters that are in really extreme need in terms of affordability. So this is some background information that I think can help inform our discussions. The document that was just circulated to the committee, I circulated a copy of this in the middle of August so that people would have an opportunity to read it beforehand and to dip into the material that's online. The report is intended to provide information for our review for work plan development, because we're required as a committee to set out a work plan for what our objectives are for the coming year. And that's sent to council, reviewed by council. We receive feedback, we might have to revise, or council might say, great, you know, go ahead. The first part of the summary document, it lists the resolutions that were passed in the last year by the current council. So resolution 17419 is that council establish a housing reserve fund and direct staff to draft the required bylaw. So staff has done that. That was approved on Tuesday evening, and that's quite important because when we have development on island that has that is required to provide an affordable housing unit. If it's a really small development, there might only be one affordable housing unit. And I'm thinking about things like the pub or the distillery. Both of those developments were required to provide affordable housing units. And that's very small. And sometimes the people who are a small contribution, sometimes the folks who are building these projects, they would rather not do that. So our OCP allows for either you provide a unit, or if it's a small project, you provide cash to an affordable housing reserve fund. And we have never had the fund in place as an option. So this kind of just ties that up and allows for that in the future with small projects.
Does it identify the income sources to create the reserve fund?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
The income, the funds that would go into the affordable housing reserve would come from a developer. It could also be funds that are identified by council from other sources. There's also something called the Municipal and Regional District Tax. Up till now, the Municipal and Regional District Tax, which we do not charge on Bowen Island, it's a tax that's charged in other municipalities on B&Bs, on hotels and so forth. Up until now, that money has always been used for marketing, for tourism organizations. So it would go to Tourism Bowen Island. The provincial government has made a recent change where the local government can decide that the MRDT tax goes into an affordable housing fund. So essentially we've created the bucket where money from a variety of sources can go into that fund. But at the moment, we have not dedicated anything specific into that fund. But it's there now, and it hasn't been there, and it should have been there a long time ago. The second resolution, that we established the advisory committee, which we've done. The third, that we proceed with the island survey, which we did. That we received the results from the island survey, which we did. And there are links to all of this information in this report, which staff will include in the revised agenda package. That I organize with staff a speaker series to help inform council decision making. We have done that. That we adopt the terms of reference for our group. We've done that. And that we endorse the community engagement program on the community lands, and we did that. And there's a report that was presented at council on Tuesday. The related council bylaws are the affordable housing policy, and I was going to ask Daniel to speak to this. I wonder, Emma, are you able to speak to it at all? Not really? Okay. So the best thing to do is to take a look at it. The gist is that 15% of projects have to be dedicated to affordable housing. So, for example, in the Grafton Lakelands project, which is coming for final adoption on the 24th of September, that project has 34, 35, I can't quite remember the exact number now, it's bounced a bit, units of affordable rental or home ownership. Okay? And that will be coming into this system, you know, over the next 5 probably years. And John Reed is looking into housing that he can locate near the water treatment plant. So this is what I'm referring to as invisible housing. There's a ton of stuff sort of in the works that is going to be visible fairly soon. The official community plan has a section that deals with housing, and then in the implementation section, section 11, there is initiatives and then cooperative ventures that we might go into. So I'll stop there. Are there any questions?
I was going to ask, because these are all in attachments, is there any one of these attachments that we're going to ask Steph to print out for everybody, because it is a ready reference? Sometimes, I mean, it's all very well, we go into our computers and we bring this stuff up, and that's great. We all know that's a tidy, paper-saving way of doing it. But is there anything that anybody feels they need here, because it's just convenient to go? For example, this excellent chart that was done on these statistics, it's the sort of thing you wouldn't want to have to keep going backwards and forwards on a screen. So, not necessarily for an answer now, but if there is, if you, yeah.
Yeah, I find it much easier to work with paper binders, so I can reference and get to things very easily. So I emailed Steph and asked if she could make up relevant documents for me in paper.
Please, all right, maybe we could leave it as that's the route to
Does
go.
anyone else want binders?
I've made up a binder for my material because
I mean, rather like the snow cone one we had, it probably will, because there is some fairly complex and thought-provoking material here. and yeah, I know, you kind of get, when you get into the details, you realize these things are complex and they're interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
So, we'll probably leave it to when we've appointed our official chair, but I think that the direction will be that we are going to need some documents that we can refer to, make tabs on. I just don't think there's any other way, and I recognise it as a rather paper-intensive exercise. But if as I hear squeals of protest around the table, I think that will probably go that way.
do we need one? Can we all each opt? Because I don't
Yes.
think that I need one.
No,
And-
precisely.
So
There are
just-
some people who don't, and I think that's absolutely fine. I think that is absolutely fine, because there's no point in doing one for someone who's either got it all organised or doesn't need it, and that will save it.
I think when we've got our work plan in place, that will help identify which of the material areas is going to be most useful. And if I could just
Go on.
carry on then, if there are any other questions. The speaker series, there were ultimately 6 elements in that. I know that some of you attended. So on the 1st of March, there was a committee of the whole, and this might be your best place to sort of get a toehold, to go in and take a look at the initial report, because it covers all of the work that has been done previously, over more than a decade. And the purpose of that committee of the whole really was to bring council up to speed on what had been done and what had been left unfinished, and ask the council of the day, where they wanted to go in wrapping some things up and moving others forward. We had a presentation on the 12th of March by Jada Bassi from City Spaces Consulting. The purpose of that session was to talk about the tools that other municipalities have to help with their housing initiatives. And it was quite informative. We have a lot of those tools in place. We haven't used them to the extent that we might. The session on the 5th of April dealt with, it was a practical workshop in detached secondary suites. So our planner and our building inspector and a local resident who had built a detached secondary suite talked about that experience. And it was a way of trying to give some meat to the bylaw that had been passed the prior year on detached secondary suites. Here are the things you need to think about. Here are some potential concerns. Here's some information about the planning process. On the 25th, we had James Forsyth from BC Housing talking about 2 major programs that BC Housing has introduced, and the process for applying for partnerships under primarily the Community Housing Fund was the one that we focused on for
There's
the
a few
most part.
different,
Yeah, and then there was one for developers that's a bit more ad hoc. And then finally, Mayor Tofino came over and she talked with us about their housing authority, because we have had lots of conversations that didn't come to any closure about whether a housing authority or a staff coordinated housing function or working with nonprofits would be the best route to go. So Josie's perspective on how their housing authority worked was useful. And she also talked about their short-term vacation rental regulation and what impact that had on the availability of rental housing for residents of Tofino. And interestingly, her conclusion, and it was a clear conclusion, was that they put in their regulation, they have enforced it rigorously for 2 years. It has had certain advantages. It has not had the advantage of turning short-term rentals into long-term rental for residents. It just didn't have that impact. Maybe a couple had gone back into the long-term rental pool. This is a very good video recording to watch. So the July 23rd video recording, I'd recommend that.
Could you clarify for me
Sure.
what you mean by that? That the short-term rentals had not turned into, so that does that mean like Airbnb, etc.? So people continue to use it as Airbnb rather than to turn it into.
That's right.
Well, and where it was restricted, they might have thought at the time in Tofino, great, that will now go back into the long-term rental market. The actual reality was, right, when you actually tick the boxes, did the numbers, that wasn't the case.
No, people want to make more money.
But even if they were prevented from doing Airbnb, it would seem that, or it was controlled in some measure, it did not provide you might have thought the desired result was to increase the amount of rental accommodation. They didn't find that happened.
Right.
That was just reporting on their experience.
Absolutely, very valuable.
Yeah.
And then the next report is from the Community Lands Workshop, and as I said, that came to Council on Tuesday. It's worth looking at. There's a short video from Metro Vancouver. They came to Bowen Island to look at some of the things that we were doing that they felt were interesting and innovative. And when I was initially contacted about this, I asked, why are you coming to Bowen? And they said, because the other small metro municipalities are doing nothing in the housing area. They were quite surprised that we had the housing series. They were quite intrigued by the project that Rondi Dyke has coming up for public hearing for employee accommodation, the float home project in the marina. So they interviewed Rondi, they interviewed Robin to talk about the Birch Initiative. They videoed footage at the Community Lands Workshop and put it together to give you a taste of what was going on here. It's a short video, it's only about 3 minutes long. So again, that's something that's worth taking a look at. And then the next part of this report, this update, is the series of questions that the March 1st Committee of the Whole ended with. And these are my notes. They are not approved by council, but it's what I heard and is a starting point for potential starting point for council or for this committee to look at some areas of concern. And I don't know if you've had a chance to go through them. We could come back to them, at a later time.
I think we may need to actually,
Yeah.
as part of the work now. But, anything else? Hold on.
Hold on.
You've already, on the next on our agenda, I think you've already touched on it as well, which is the affordable housing reserve, which Maureen discusses this bucket for collection. It is something which we needed to set up. I think it's a good thing that we have it. It's something that will probably need to be applied fairly. It will be a matter of discussion on each individual development, because whilst all these, this is maybe very commendable, it imposes something upon the developer. And if you impose something upon the developer, you increase the costs, and that may not help you in the direction you want to go. So it's established, we've got it there. I don't think we need to dwell on it particularly. I think it may well be the same. But when we review items and projects are put in front of us, then that's the time when we have to look at everything upon its merits to see how it's going to go.
I think Maureen hinted at it. The Airbnb, the NDP are putting in Airbnb are going to do the tax collection, and that legislation needs to be in place, and that to me would seem to be an obvious place to then take a skim every year into the housing fund. And
It could well be, because the industry, B&B and bed and breakfast, face a new raft of taxes coming in this fall. As you know, they will have to, whether they've got 1 bedroom or 10 or however many, they will have to start doing the tax. And I think as well that everyone around the table should know that available to municipalities are now companies who do nothing else than track internet platforms for people advertising with B&B, Airbnb, whereas before it was purely speculative or by complaint. People could fly under the radar, they thought they could. Those days of the sort of the wild west of operations of that type are now gone, because there are companies who set themselves up commercially to advise municipalities or any other jurisdictions on just who is offering accommodation for short-term rental and on what basis. So that is, if you like, people talk about tools in the toolbox, that one moves along as well. So that is it. And that is, I think, relatively new. I got my first email on that a few months ago, before the summer. I heard about it then. Maybe it's been going for a bit longer, but let's see.
There was a webinar about 2 years ago where this program was being introduced. It's a company called, it's a linked company to iCompass, and the program that's used is called Host Compliance. And it's the program that Tofino signed on to, and they found is extremely effective. But all of the communities that have used Host Compliance to date have in place a business licensing program. So last year, there was a working group of the Economic Development Committee, which Michael and I both serve on, and what we focused on was putting in the foundation for a business licensing program on Bowen, and that's working its way through various readings. And
it might be interesting for everyone to know there's an information session next week. I think is it Wednesday or Thursday?
Wednesday.
Which is rather unfortunate. Just for everyone's information, we have the Union of BC Municipalities meeting in Whistler next week. But I think Daniel is Daniel doing this? Yes. I think people might, so this is an information centre on business licenses, and why do we talk about this in a housing committee? Because, as I said, it's part of this complex situation where things are interrelated, and it's going to go into the mix. I would request perhaps not to discuss it now because this is being laid out in front of us. But Daniel is either Wednesday or Thursday evening, if I remember correctly, doing an information session on business licenses. And I think it was advertised in the Undercurrent.
I have it down as Thursday.
Thursday? I'm sure it's Robin. Yes.
Thursday,
Is it 4 o'clock to 7 or something?
Okay.
4 to 7, thank you. Okay,
I have a question.
yes.
We already do have some managed housing, rental housing here on Bowen, under here, for example. Have we examined, or is it obvious to everybody how that housing got in place, what the process was for that, and how it's being made? We know how it's being maintained, but we could learn from that. That works.
Mhm.
I believe we have something in the region of 38 managed rental units on the island. Is that correct?
Don't know.
Yeah, I think so. And that works.
I take your point on that one. I wonder if we could ask. I wouldn't mind a little more information on that because I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you how many. Which is probably.
I did some research because there's above the store. There's
Yes. Yeah.
Pitzel Pharmacy in that corner, and then there's down underneath.
Just down here.
Just down here.
Visible from here.
Yes.
Is that something you could speak to, Steve?
If you're referring to the same thing I think you're referring to, that is some structures that at the time of construction, the rents had to be below a certain percentage below the GBRD rent patterns. I can speak to the complex immediately behind us, which is 12 units, as I recall, for declaration. I used to own them, at least my kids used to own them. But they run a 10-year expiry. So I know the units here have expired beyond that time period. That is something the committee may want to look at some point in time, because if I can expand your question a bit, North Van currently has a situation, I think Emma could probably correct me on the details of this, is that they have a program now that on certain new rental type projects that it's either 10 or 15%, don't quote me on a percentage, have to be 10 or 15% GBRD averages. You can argue what our average is, by the way, you can spend a half a day on that. And effective is a proposal before council now, we're working its way through staff to get to council. Instead of being 10 years evergreen, they want them to be perpetual. And we can debate the pluses and minuses of that also. So it's not unique to Bowen. A lot of municipalities have, in order to get the zoning density in return as part of a community amenity, that developers will agree to keep such and such a percentage below some criteria.
What was it that whoever built it? Do you know who built those
I think
units?
it was the German company with Wolfgang as a partner.
Okay. So what was it that induced Wolfgang or that company to create rental units rather than units for sale, which I assume is more beneficial?
Could I interrupt, Alison? I think this is very important, but I feel like it would be better for
I'm going to ask.
a later time.
Can I hold that? If I had little yellow stickies, I would take that. But
Bring my bag of tricks next time.
I would take that for
Yeah.
future
Yeah.
discussion. Which brings me to 4.1. Now, elections are rather in vogue at the moment. We would genuinely like to appoint by a process of consensus, a chair, and well, certainly by consensus, by the chair and a vice chair. And I did have a chance to discuss this with Maureen before and reiterate that we're both firmly of the opinion that councillors should not be chairs at all. As I say, we're no way are we going to do a hand-washing exercise and abrogate ourselves of all responsibilities, on the contrary. But we found it's genuinely good practice for council members not to be chair of these committees, but it's really important that it's community-led as far as possible. Steph is, may I say, a permanent addition to this, so we have Steph as our resource. and I, depending on outcome of elections and who does what, I can assure you, please believe me, that neither Maureen or myself are in any way running away from this or trying to abdicate our responsibilities. But we would like to appoint a chair and a vice chair. I don't think we have a formal procedure for that.
We just somebody nominate somebody.
It's a nomination.
Or if it gets contentious, we can do a secret ballot.
We could do a secret ballot. I just like not to have to do a
No.
secret ballot. It's a bit awkward if you know most of the people around the room. How secret. But you've got handwriting like mine. The moment you put it in, it's. Yes, could we have any nominations for chair for
I wonder if you could quickly describe what the responsibilities are of the chair and so that people who maybe aren't familiar with it know what they're signing up for.
Based upon the other committees, would you like to add
So
some?
the chair's going to run the meeting as Michael's doing now, and prior to the meeting, the chair would work with staff, myself and Daniel, and possibly other members, selecting the agenda items and basically guiding the direction, taking feedback from other committee members on what would be on the agenda. That's not a... David could probably speak to that.
Yeah, and perhaps doing some research.
An hour or so, maybe?
Well, it depends on what's going on.
Yeah.
Basically setting the agenda.
Yeah.
So that means talking to other members of the committee who are interested in particular issues, deciding whether to bring them on or not, discussing it with staff, getting any information that might be needed to support members when they have the discussion on those issues. So it really depends. That it might be an hour or two in prep, or it might be longer than that.
It's like
And
a
then
couple
of course,
hours.
it's running the meeting, following up, reviewing the minutes.
There we go. Yeah, that seems pretty. Any questions on that one? It really is the before, during, and after work of any meeting, and sometimes as well some research as well, because a subject was raised by Alison this morning, and I thought, oh gee, I'd like to know a bit more about that, because I couldn't answer those questions. So this is where the chair will often say, okay, let's just get a short paper, information paper, or something on that from people who know. Okay.
I could add that the election of the chair and the vice chair happens every year at the beginning of the year. So whoever puts their name forward for chair and vice chair, you're essentially committed to the October and the November, if we have a November meeting. So at most, you're committing yourself to chairing two meetings and getting a sense of what it might be like, what the workload would be like.
Yeah.
So you are not signing away your firstborn
No, you're
child.
not. Daniel.
Or all your free time.
Okay.
And you can start making eye contact again.
You nominate yourself as well, that'll get the ball rolling.
Any nominees, anyone wishing to nominate anyone around the table?
Or themselves.
Or themselves.
Yeah, okay, well, it's going to come second. Okay, I'd like to ask if someone would be prepared, please, for initially to take the chair.
If for the rest of the year, yes, and then hopefully everybody, I'm mean, if you guys think that's appropriate, I am a little bit concerned, given that I'm the ED of Birch. So if people object to that at all, I'm happy to not do it, because I don't know that it's a straight out conflict of interest, but obviously Birch may benefit from some decisions or recommendations made here, although we are a nonprofit building community housing, so there's not like a, so I don't know that maybe I am the appropriate person to do it, so.
Let's just address that conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Everybody around this table in a small community,
Yeah.
right, is in some ways has a fingerprint, architectural or development, on things that happen. If we were to exclude everybody who had an interest in a community like this, we would be out walking in the streets with a big net trying to find people. It is just simply impossible. And where do people feel there's a conflict? It's very straightforward. They simply raise their hands and say, look, perhaps I just need to step out while there's subjects to discuss. It shouldn't become a bogeyman or a taboo at all. People in the communities outside, we have to deal with this all the time. And I think we can without stepping on any feet. Well, thank you for that, Robin.
Because there was deafening silence.
Well, yeah. There is sometimes the level of energy can just drop periodically at this time. Would anybody prepared for the rest of this term to be supporting Robin in the form of vice chair?
Maybe you're thinking about being chair and you weren't sure, so you
Yeah.
might be the vice chair. See what it's like over a couple
I
of
got conflicts too, I'd be happy to
Would you?
balance off Robin.
Yes.
mutual conflict.
I think that would be great. So we have Robin as chair, Steve as vice chair. Any other people who just absolutely climbing onto the table to put their name forward with a placard?
I just wanted to mention that I was actually going to suggest Robin, because I felt that Robin was probably closest to this right now of the group that's here, and so that's a big.
Maureen and I could, I think fight for that position maybe.
Well, yes, well,
But she's not,
but
I'm not in the
excluded
chair.
herself.
she's excluded, so but I didn't ask you or speak to you about it or anything. I didn't really want to step out like that, but I
Nominate
think
me out of the
that
blue.
I'm just gonna throw you under the bus anyway.
You were, all right, I'll throw myself under the bus.
Having had two people we'd like to rescue from the bus, we should, I think, formally appoint both and separately. Okay. So we have a nomination for Robin for chair. I'm going to put that forward, and I'm going to ask someone to second that, please. Any discussion on Robin for chair? Could I ask for a show of hands by way of approval?
Do I vote for
Yes.
myself?
Yes. It's actually a little odd if you don't.
If I don't.
I'm opposed.
Okay.
I like abstaining sometimes.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Well, the problem with abstaining is counted as a...
Voting positive.
Oh, is it?
Yes. Abstaining doesn't get everyone where they want to get.
Life,
Yeah.
I have to walk out of the room.
And is there a part of this sort of
If you wait for either?
quite remarkable all-star team? We have Steve Bellringer for vice chair, and I would like to ask if someone would nominate Steve. And any discussion, please, on the subject? Hearing none. Hearing none. Could I ask please for a show of hands to appoint Steve Bellringer as vice
Well,
chair?
because I can't abstain, I understand.
Yeah, there's no way out of this door. Well, I can't tell you how pleased I am to know that we have successfully elected a chair and a vice chair at our first meeting. And I thank both of you, by the way. And I know I'm speaking on Maureen's behalf as ourselves, because this is honestly what we want to see, really. And I thank you both, because there is no shortage of unpaid work.
No.
Gosh, talk about unpaid work. Would you like to come and sit here?
I think you can continue for the rest of this meeting, that's fine. I'll take over next.
Yes, you're on a roll,
You're doing very well.
Lead by example.
A delegation, all right. And I'm looking at my watch, because one of the things about the chair is, how are we on time or are we not? And maybe we said, and I wonder, please, because we could, I could see this as one item where we could get a little derailed. Development of a work plan. I'm going to ask Maureen to help me here as well, because development of a work plan is in and of itself a pretty huge subject, right? And I'm wondering how we can break this down into manageable pieces so it comes up with something that when people leave this room, they feel they've got a sense of direction.
Emma, you put together work plans all the time. Could you talk to sort of the structure of what a work plan would look like for this committee?
Well, I think to start, probably get all the priorities on the table that the group deems to be a priority. And then if it's something that we can manage to accomplish in the span of 1 year, that's great. Then we can just organize it in terms of how long does each task take and which one do we want to tackle first. But if there's more priorities than we can tackle, then I think we start to have to vote them down, decide as a group what we want to do. So it's just working through, I think, refining from the brainstorm of everything we want to do, what can we accomplish in 1 year, and then what is the order that we need to do it in, put it on paper.
So I've actually, not specifically a work plan, but I've facilitated sessions where we've done this sort of strategic planning and stuff. So I'm happy to lead either today, we could get a start, or next session, or whatever it is, or if we plan a separate session. I know that's always hard to get people together. Yeah, there's ways of doing it, you know, Post-it notes and markers, and you know, you kind of do all that kind of stuff in Brainstorm. And sorry, I'm already kind of taking over. Like looking at the agenda, we're...
I found it inconceivable that you wouldn't. That's why you've been appointed as chair.
We're ahead of time,
And,
so...
and I was going to ask, because, here I think is the question, if I may. The preparation of such an exercise does take a little bit of time, right? We don't just suddenly...
It can,
jump
but we can
into
also, we could also just jump in.
Steph is going to get the
Yeah,
We have
so I
time.
mean, it's, because that's what I was just looking at. Is there anything else? The only thing after this is some information items, vital conversations, island survey, and I think that's just reference for people to look at.
Okay,
So-
I'm going to just ask for the sake of formality of the agenda. I'm just going to ask that so we can concentrate on 5.1,
Yeah.
are you agreeable in terms of the information items, which are usually not discussed in any length, be submitted to you as information items? That is 6.1 and 6.2, just for the sake of completion of the proper completion of the agenda. So if you're agreeable to have those items submitted to you as information items, which by the way is a normal protocol, then with your agreement, then we can just focus on 5.1. But I want to clean those two loose ends up before we do that. Can I just ask for someone to propose that as a motion? That we agree to accept 6.1 and 6.2 as information items.
Second.
Thank you. And no further discussion. I've just got to ask for your agreement on this. Thank you. I'm going to take that as read, which means, Madam, that we can now dedicate ourselves to 5.1.
Well, and then the next meeting, is it already in the books that it's going to be?
No, we do not as yet, and I think that is something that we
We'll wait for stuff to get back.
Yeah.
But this is what, the first Friday, is that where we're at? So is that the plan? First Friday?
I think it probably was, but it was subject to an okay from the committee.
I mean,
Okay.
we are meeting here on Friday morning. Is this generally a good time?
Well, I know it was extensive,
It was
pretty
work-
survey.
Yeah, she worked at finding a time
Finding
to
a
work for
time.
everybody, so seems like this time will
So,
work.
First Friday mornings, it's iffy for you?
Yeah.
Is there,
If we could avoid the last Friday in the month, because I always have an event downtown on the fourth Thursday of the month.
right, yes.
So that just kills any
Well, I
meeting.
mean, does anybody have objections to the first Friday? At least for, let's say, October, November. Can we commit to those two
Absolutely.
dates? And then we can always revisit it after that?
So let's just, can I just,
So it would be October, I think it's the long weekend, Mike, so
It's
that
the
might be a
5th.
problem, October 5th
well, this is just the sort of thing we run
and
into.
November 2nd.
can we just bear with
Yeah,
us a moment?
that's why I want to talk about it now, so let's get it out of the way. Not at, 11:14.
Mm.
We all want to get out of the room.
Okay, so the first one that you're talking about is October?
October 5th, and that is the Friday of the Thanksgiving long weekend. So that's not a problem for me, but if it may be for others.
But I cannot be there, actually.
No.
on holiday, so.
Okay. And I mean, there's gonna be meetings where people can't make it, and there is always the option to call in. We can, if like, for some reason, logistics are, you can always call in and at least listen and participate remotely. Hopefully not on holidays, you're allowed to have a holiday.
I'll be on holiday.
Good.
Holidays.
Is that all right so far? Hearing no strong objections?
I'm okay in October, but the
But the November
November 2nd
2nd?
morning I can't do. It's
Okay.
the only day in about 10-day stint there I can't do that morning, so
Okay.
whatever else see that is.
Okay, so do we wanna try and find a different, I mean, in my
How about the
experience, it's better.
second Friday of the month,
EDC is on second Friday?
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Third,
I love
No.
the second Friday. Would you?
Actually, if you could avoid the third Friday, that'd be so
Fourth?
good.
No, Metro.
Steph, do you know
Okay.
already what
I think we
people's
stick
availability?
with the first.
You know it's a Friday morning that folks can do it.
Yes.
If it's okay, I think let's just stick with the first, and it's unfortunate that, but I think it's just easier for everybody.
At the moment, if we were
At the
doing one of
moment.
those poll things, which you'll get
Yeah.
from
we'll
Steph
do
saying,
polls,
well,
yeah.
so why don't we?
I am a
put-
fan of in the room though. 'cause
Yeah.
There's
So
more
it's,
information.
Fritz will
available.
miss one, Steve will miss one. I think that's pretty good. If we're only missing one person at each of those meetings, I feel like that's a great, a great thing.
So, and does the 9:30 time work? We should
Yes,
just check.
that's fine for me.
I will.
Yeah. Okay, so let's lock those two first Friday of the next 2 months, and we can
Okay,
always revisit.
can we just take a second? Would you mind if we just put these in, because if they're not?
Steph, do you send out a thing, a calendar thing? Yeah, so Steph sends it out as well.
What's the second one? There was the one.
November 2nd.
It's my mom's birthday and my son's birthday.
Oh, wow.
And December.
Okay, good, that sounds at least put away for funding.
So, yeah, I mean, often when you do
We
these
said
kind of
9:30,
things.
sorry.
Yeah, 9:30 to 11:30. Often you do prepare and you figure that stuff out, but we're also here in the room and we've all,
Yeah.
read and prepared, and I'm sure we have lots and lots of ideas. We already know Allison has some. So I feel like maybe let's just throw out some Post-its. Why don't we just take 5 minutes and just like, what do you think? So you're here on this committee, you came for a reason. What do you think, either some goals and things we should be doing? Are there some specific action items that we should be doing? Try to put one idea on each Post-it, and then just kind of do that for 5 minutes. And then what we do, thank you, Steph, is we'll just try and group them. So we pull them up, we cluster them, and usually how it works is themes emerge. And so then we can start seeing, and even if today we just kind of throw some ideas out there, find some loose themes, and then at the next meeting, it takes more shape in a work plan. But I think today, let's just get those ideas out there.
Just the ideas focusing
I
on.
think ideas, goals, specific action items, really it's very wide open at the moment. And if you feel like it has a header, this should be one of our goals, or if you feel that, say, this is an action item, put that on there. Or just simply a priority of ours. Let's try this. Use that. Oh, up there. Okay, we can do it together. Okay.
Yes, I can also start collecting and slacking some stuff up.
Yeah, okay. Maybe just put them out, or do you want to attempt to group them and theme them, or do you want to just put them and we can go through together? Yeah,
We could all look at it.
otherwise, yeah, let's put them on a row and we'll look at them together.
inventory what we already have.
And it does help, even if it's already up there, write it as well, because it then helps us visually see, oh, like 5 people thought that was a good idea. That should be prioritized. It helps us visually and quickly prioritize.
I think this is similar, saying common knowledge of input factors. Am I saying that right?
We can, and when we're done, we can.
That one will reflect that one. That one will reflect it.
Oh. Determining our ultimate goals and having the right tools in place. This is similar. What is success?
You know what I think? Let's just leave it for about 3 or 4 minutes quietly and like let everybody kind of get their things out, and then I think as a group we'll start reading them out and grouping them. I feel like it's a little much to listen and group and then be focusing on mine. Is that all right? So we'll take another 3 or 4 minutes individually, and then I think we'll start reading them out in clustering. Let's wait till we're all done, and then, so maybe just put them on a row over there.
It's not a what?
Not a doctor at all.
Or everyone could just
Yeah, I think maybe just do that. So everybody hang on to your post-its,
Yeah,
let's
we'll
not
have
collect them,
everyone
and we'll
explain
just,
their own post-its.
sorry, this is just a little bit on the fly, right?
Yeah.
We're just making them up as we go.
Explain your own. Okay.
Is there an ulterior motive, giving everybody different colors? Is this how
So we all know exactly.
Secretly hierarchical.
They're pretty lurid, aren't they? Even I could tell the difference.
Yeah, but it's all secret. It's all.
Can you spell the difference?
I can. Some are dark and some are light.
Ah.
Really have to explain yourself.
Yeah. Just take 1 more minute, final thoughts, and then we'll come back together.
Get those back. Are we supposed to read them off?
Oh, I think, yeah, pull them back, let's read them all together. Yeah, I think that will be, then we're all focused and paying attention and listening.
I can do some handwriting analysis while we're waiting.
Easy on that.
Color.
Yeah.
Sound like my wife.
What's that one? What's that? Well, pink, it could either be
Sounds
Daniel
like Pinky
or
over here.
Michael.
Yeah, it's too neat.
Here,
Yeah.
David, return to sender.
No, that one's too smart for me.
No,
That must
that
be
might be
Michael.
Michael.
It's too
Oh,
pretty
Michael?
for Daniel.
You tell my wrinkles.
It's lovely.
Shame you can't read it.
Who's this? Roger.
Thanks.
While we're waiting, I printed off your copy of the survey.
A couple people still scribbling, we'll take another moment. Okay, I think we'll get started. If you're still, that's okay. If you want to keep writing a couple of ideas down, keep going. So I'll start. I think what we'll do is I'll just put out, I only have a few. I'm sure more will come to me next week after the meeting. But I'll put them up and explain briefly, and then we'll just kind of go around and maybe we'll just share the ideas, and then if you have one that's similar, say, hey, mine's similar, you explain your bit, and then we'll kind of start to cluster them that way. So it's a bit of a, just jump in. Yeah, we'll see what happens. So I think this is similar to what probably a couple of other people have said, surveys. Gather data, get information. So one is on existing rental stock, which I don't think would be too challenging. And the other one that is on my radar is employee housing needs. So what are they full-time and what are they summer only? That's one that's on my radar, is really what is that need for the businesses, for the local economy in the summer? And what's that number? So those are one of mine. So essentially kind of data gathering. Is there anybody else that has ideas around gathering data, existing
I
housing stock?
think that kind of says the same thing.
Yeah, do you want to elaborate at all? Or
Well, what
is-
have I
Oh.
let's see what I said. I said ability to work and live on bone. What housing is needed to achieve?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which I think is really.
I actually think that's gonna go with my next one, so I'm
Okay.
gonna hang on to that. Any other?
Yeah, I
sort of
have
gathering
one. People who
data?
are acutely in danger of homelessness.
Right, find those people, find out what their numbers are, what are their needs. Yeah, so it's gathering that information, that data.
I've got two. One is to simply include housing questions again in the island survey.
That was great, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Bob, look at that.
And then find out more about the new provincially funded needs assessments. Selena Robinson has said that there's going to be provincial money to do needs assessments on a regular basis.
That's a standard template, is it, for all municipalities?
Yeah.
And it's is it a requirement, or
Yes.
it's a, that's what I thought, which is kind of great news,
So
and
they,
especially if there's.
they're getting all the information basically coming from the same, in the same
Yeah.
format.
Yeah, great, consistent, that's fantastic. Okay, so my next one, and along the lines of what you had said, Michael, was, are you all familiar with the housing, I think it's called the housing spectrum? It was, Jada introduced it at one of the talks, and it essentially goes from, generally at the left, emergency cold weather shelter, shelters, transitional housing, supportive, social housing, and it goes up all the way to private ownership. So it's sort of this spectrum, and in my mind that's kind of a socioeconomic, you could describe in other ways, spectrum. So mine is examine, Owen's is kind of linked with the get info, but look at what do we have in that spectrum and where are the gaps? And I think that's, Michael, what you meant by, what do we need to achieve this work for everybody?
Absolutely.
And the other thing that's on mine that goes along with that is what are the gaps, not only in that socioeconomic, but we could maybe have another one that's about your times of life. Because, when you're a young person, 19 years old working at one of the restaurants, earning whatever you're earning, your housing needs are very different from somebody who's 30-something with 2 kids, which is also very different from somebody in their 50s wanting to downsize, or somebody who's 70 and wanting to, needing support. So it's also looking at that time span and where are the gaps, like what are we addressing or missing? So
I had a similar thing, same line, I just call it market needs segmentation.
that's a very nice, professional development kind of, I love it, that's great. Very succinct. Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, I guess this is, and I think you've mentioned it, look at how our current rental housing was created and is being maintained.
Yeah, okay.
How feasible is it financially?
Yeah,
Those
so
models.
I think that might be into the get info.
Yeah, I think so.
Like, how has it been done before successfully on Bowen? Maybe how has it been done that's not so successful, so you don't repeat the same mistakes? Yeah, I think looking into that.
Maybe a subgroup of Get Info of best practices.
Yeah, or lessons learned, lessons learned, best practices, yeah, I think that could be useful. Anything else along those lines of identifying gaps, needs, anything like that?
In summary, I got key takeaways from Island Survey. Based upon what
Okay.
Maureen said, I read the Island Survey in detail and made some notes on it. There's some interesting things there about that in my mind differed from my perception, even though I'm new to the island, my perception, what I thought people were thinking, and what's in the survey of density and things like that.
Yeah, okay, great. So yeah, I think that's looking at the information that's coming in from, because I think that's one of the, not the most important, but one of the really important voices that we need to listen to is the community and what they're telling us through surveys, through engagement, hearing directly from them. Yeah, it's really important. Yeah.
So they thought that, but on info, what are we actually doing? What are we giving out in building permits? What are we allowing to be built
Yeah,
here?
so just some stats.
Are
Yeah,
those
do you want to write
stats,
that down, or do you want me to write it down?
are they matching our image of what we're doing?
So stats, BPs, is that getting our goal kind of thing, getting to
Yeah.
our goal, that kind of, okay.
It's
And that's
12
probably a
per-
pretty easy thing to find.
Oh yeah, desperately. And
Yeah.
the region on the island, there are. And,
Yeah.
Mine is identifying barriers to what is might be
yes.
to creating
Yeah.
affordable housing.
Yeah, that might be this
Mm.
best
So
practice lessons
Maureen and
learned.
Michael will probably know a lot about what has to be done to put that into place.
So a review of OCP housing policy.
Yeah, well,
It might be that, it might be regulations, it might be finance.
Well, this is
Yes.
part of obstacles.
Obstacles, okay, so
This is
identify
obstacles.
how existing zoning is an obstacle to achieve housing objectives. I think
Same
that's
thing.
really relevant. Okay, I think this is a new theme emerging.
Sorry, I missed that, what was it?
So,
Obstacles to
identifying how existing zoning is an obstacle to achieve our housing objectives. I think that's a great, succinct way of putting it,
mobile
yeah.
homes being banned on the island, which
Yes,
is
exactly,
appropriate for
so
working
how are
people.
these existing, what's being restricted by our existing zoning, OCP, all of those
Density.
bylaws and all that stuff that are holding us back, like, who was it? Sorry, where was it last night? Did anybody else go to that conservative development thing? Yeah, you were there, I know for sure. Anyway, so it was one of the points that they brought up, what John Reed brought up was like, hey, the existing zoning says this, you know, and all of the, you know, what people could arguably say are the successful developments recently were actually changed from that. So yeah, I think that's a very valid point. It's examining what we're having, and then that could be recommendations for the
This may
future.
be the same thing. I got common knowledge of inputs, the land base, there's only so much land available. There's construction costs, capital costs, and provincial programs. I think we may not have a common base of knowledge. I don't pretend to understand all the provincial
Yeah.
programs, for example.
That's
So we need a little
that could be
educational
that could be
session.
under, yeah, it could be under those, so let's leave it there. It could
I
be
love
under
this one.
that.
What is success?
Yeah,
I mean,
That
you're gonna
ties into
start
mine
something,
for
how do
us
you
as
know
our
if you're
committee, you
successful
mean?
or not? Yeah.
yeah, agreed.
So we wake up 2 years from now, we wanna brag about what we did or how do
we
we?
just find no one wanted it anyway.
Well, or, and I mean, it's, you know, you don't wanna just be at the end of the
Success
year
is we had a
going,
great chairman, let's all go home.
Yeah, mine is similar. Have the tools in place to actually create affordable housing after 2 years, if we're not actually putting spades in the ground.
okay, yeah. So I wanna hear, Roger, you haven't said much. Do you have
Well,
one that you wanna?
I'm just thinking of one I have, just identify what has been working really well that we've done in the past, and then what has been the main problem.
Yeah, I think that's along with
Appears that it may be-
this one, identifying problems.
Here,
Instead of saying problems, I just wanted to be a little
Challenges?
more proactive. I'm going to say tools needed to achieve our goals.
That's a positive thought, so we
Yeah.
gotta have
Yes.
positive thoughts.
Yeah.
So, under that topic, I've got research incentives for developers in comparable communities.
Okay, research incentives, developers and common community, yeah.
Research.
So is that a, I think that's the sort of research part,
Yeah.
yeah.
Robin, this is confidential.
The tools needed.
Yeah,
I
review
think so.
floor space and other incentives, yeah. So
Robin?
Tools needed, yeah.
Could Maureen's one actually go into tools needed?
Yeah, you think so?
Because
Incentives.
it's more, an incentive is a tool that's needed.
Okay, yeah,
For
I'm happy to,
developers.
that's part of, that's why they're sticky notes, because then we can move them around.
So
And we
good.
can shuffle these afterwards, and likely some will come together, right? And then others might break apart, that's part of this process. So Michael, review all players affecting housing, understand the role they play, and develop relationships.
Well, we have a lot of people here on island
Yeah,
who are in the business of building and developing.
yeah,
And I think they need to be drawn into the conversation,
yeah.
and I think they need to be part of the conversation.
So I'm gonna put this under, can we make a heading of engagement?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd for sure be adding, and I mean, again, these can change and move and everything, but I would say engagement, that's with the different players, the developers, landowners, community members, I think,
Slightly along the different audience, but slightly along the same line.
yeah. Understand the role of government support for housing and how to maximize opportunities.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think engagement with levels of government, funding opportunities, yeah, same thing?
Topic.
Yep, okay, work out a proactive relationship with Metro Housing Corporation. Anybody else along those lines? Relationship building, engagement, yeah, maybe relationship building is another kind of subheading. Again, we can be a little loose about these at the moment, they're not committed. Yeah, okay, anybody else? We haven't heard much, so Roger
This
and
could go under, probably under get info, it's just potential community projects and then specific community projects, such as the fire hall.
Okay. Oh, okay, so looking at, yeah, so just a snapshot, what's happening right now?
Right.
What are the things that are under development?
That's a very good point, actually. Just
Yeah.
to do a quick, let's draw a line under so we.
Yeah, as of
So we know
October
what's
2018.
happening, we don't need, in some ways, we don't need to discuss
Yeah,
that.
the list
because
of
that
invisible
quota
houses, is that what
sale.
you mean? Yeah, I'd actually love to see, I agree, I think, and this is great that we're talking about, one of the things I'd love to see, so sorry, can I digress for a moment? I did my university studies in Sydney, Australia, and at their central city hall of the actual downtown of Sydney, they have a real life scale, I think it's 1 to 5,000 or 1 to 1,000 model, you know, it's bigger than this table, of the entire downtown peninsula of Sydney. And so all the existing buildings are a certain color, gray. When they do a proposal, when it's at a different stage, so if it's at a development permit stage, it's like blue, and they have to show it there. If it's at the building permit stage, it's red, or whatever, so that you can walk in there at any moment, see what's existing, what's proposed early stages, what's proposed later stages, and it's this incredible, like, oh my gosh, there's gonna be this tower there, or there's gonna be that. I'm not proposing that for us, but what it made me think of, could we have a map and show this invisible housing? Here's what's existing. We'd show for obvious, like for example, Grafton Lakes. There's going to be 120 or whatever it is units there, and I mean, we don't know how long it's going to take to develop, but it would show us, okay, here's where we are now, here's where we're going to be in 5 or 10, here's what's in the pipeline, right? And then where are the gaps? Because I think that's part of this gap analysis, is like, okay, that's what's going to be there, but we're still missing these other bits. We need to figure out how to get those other bits in there. So yeah, that's great.
Robin, if we're talking about gap
Yeah.
analysis too, and piggybacking on yours, whether it's a stick or not, is the schedule's important because of lack of trades. I mean, if you're gonna build something, offshore trades are very difficult to get to the island.
Yeah.
And we've got some key projects coming up, as just mentioned, and we're gonna have a trades, well, there already is a trades constraint problem in Vancouver, let alone
yeah.
here. And
And
we don't have
Victoria.
a lot of big contractors on the island to handle big projects. So I think that's something that we need a sticky on that. I could have wrote it written up, but I didn't, sorry.
Yeah, so maybe that's, how could we word that, sort of just how are availability of tradespeople constraining development or, you know, housing? Okay. And it's interesting, I actually think, because I'm on the EDC as well, it'd be interesting to link in with them, because that's something that maybe is relevant to them as well. Trades constrain. This is really messy, diverse. Have we heard, is there anybody who has a few that they haven't kind of, I feel like everybody's mostly got a turn to.
I'm not quite sure, right, but just sort of building design ideas, whether it's multifamily or tiny houses or something like that. I'm not going to support it. And leasing of municipal lands.
Okay.
Well, and this is similar to what you're saying.
Yeah, okay. Identify potential forms of development, yeah, so that one. So, okay, so leasing of municipal lands, building ideas. Let's put this in its own little cluster, maybe just for a moment. Let's see, because that's about what are different forms of housing. Is it tiny houses, is it multifamily, is it, you know, what are these diverse housing forms? So that might slot in somewhere, or it might be its own. Let's see where the conversation goes.
Sort of related.
Okay, so recommend putting out an EOI for Lot 1, Area 2, if rezoning concludes. Investigate community land trust, so those are two separate things.
Should this be a arrangement in terms of are we identifying this with the community?
I don't know yet, let's see where it goes. Yeah. Investigate community land trust, I think that is maybe a get info, best practices, lessons learned. Is that fair, Marie? And then putting out an EOI. I think this is kind of engagement. EOI for Lot 1, and if I may, I'm just going to throw this out there, and again, this is kind of an EDC hat as well, for industrial land.
Yeah.
And I know that's,
No,
I don't know,
think-
do you
no,
guys make that
I
connection
think,
with
I think
housing?
that came out very clearly. It may be a side issue,
Yeah,
but it's out there. There's definitely
Yeah.
expressed an interest of creating
Sewer and water
on
use.
Bowen an
Yeah.
area for light
But
industrial.
that comes straight back to Stephen's point of trades.
yes.
You
Yeah.
then give a trade somewhere to be on the
Yes.
island.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
it, and I
yeah.
think in EDC, we've
That's came out very
my
strongly.
takeaway is that we've identified as a restriction to our economic growth, as lack of industrial land, lack of space for trades, and I think it's directly impacting construction, trades, availability.
So is that an EOI as well? Are we saying as
Let's be
such?
loose about it at this
Yeah.
stage. It would be, how do we, an EOI, investigate it, and whatever you wanna call it. Investigate. I actually think an EOI could be really interesting, but
Yeah,
that's
I do too.
let's not dive deep into it.
This is not related to anything that's up there already, but
Okay.
it has to do with being able to do our work.
Yeah.
Like some of the ideas that we
So it
might
says,
come
sorry,
up with.
get required funding and resources for committee initiatives.
Yeah. So there may be all sorts of stuff that we can't do on our own, and we're gonna need staff support, and we're gonna need
Budget.
some cash. And if this is in fact, I mean, the fellow who used to be the city planner in Vancouver, his line is, you look at the budget to see what a council's priorities are.
Right.
And if we are not putting
Follow the money from
resources,
Bob.
if we're not putting resources
So I think that's a
into
great
the budget.
segue.
So-
We are, in the interest of time,
Yeah.
we have to start moving on, and Steph actually passed on a great, I think, little resource, and I think this would be a good roadmap to really narrowing down the work plan.
Okay.
This is.
I'm okay, can we keep going just to get all of these out, and then, like,
Sure,
I'm
I'm
okay if
just
this
gonna-
happens today and we finish up next session.
Sure,
Like,
yeah, I'm
okay.
just gonna pass this out, and this
Yeah.
comes back to Maureen's comment.
Yeah.
We have to start narrowing things down, giving
Yeah.
them a timeline, giving them a budget, and then prioritizing which ones are we really going to be able to do and want to do.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna pass this out, and you can.
Yeah, no, thank you, that's really useful. And my next question was, just 1 second, Maureen and Michael and Steph, what's the timeline for a budget request to make sure that it gets into the next budget? When do we have to make that ask?
I would say February.
Sooner.
Oh, no,
I
it
say
gets
October.
approved.
I would think, you know, our budgets get concluded, of course, in spring of the year, but
Yeah.
really things should be, things should be known, November.
Well,
So that-
capital requests,
Yeah.
according to our new CFO, deadline is in October.
Okay,
October.
I was totally wrong.
Ah,
Is
But
that
then you've
include
got-
increasing the
That's
per
the
diem at the
request.
committee?
right. So why don't, I'm gonna put that on
Yes.
my action items.
Okay.
Over the next month, I'm gonna work with staff and figure out when exactly is a deadline. If we as a committee wanna request a budget, when is that deadline? So that we can work towards that. Because I don't want to miss out on the budget next year if we actually have some priorities that we want some money for.
You see, Rogers can say end of October, that's good, but a whole lot of new folk at the beginning of November may have some other ideas.
Yeah.
So, but
So,
however,
yeah.
it doesn't mean it isn't a bad thing for him to have it there.
Well, exactly, so let's work on that and we'll report back next meeting and then I think I'm getting the sense, because we've only got 15-ish minutes left, we'll get through this, maybe we'll have a bit of discussion as to the themes merging or separating all of that stuff, and then we'll take away, and next meeting I think we can start to prioritize ad numbers. Does that sound reasonable? To everybody, yeah?
As an additional one, throw in taxes. I mean, if there's some, the money is the oil that makes everything happen. So I think different people on the island can pay a different amount of tax than they are at present.
Are you talking about businesses?
Funnily enough, no. The holiday maker, the 25% holiday-owned people. This problem of Bowen is absolutely loud and clear in the southwest of England, and there some places put double and triple on the holiday owner because it's a merchant banker from London coming down to a small country village in the southwest. So a higher tax rate for the holiday homeowner,
Could you write that down in a post-it?
and similarly Airbnb is
That's
we wanna
exactly
capture
what
that.
City of Vancouver
Help
did.
develop additional housing
it's
agreements.
a necessity. It would
Do
then
you have a
mean
sense of where that
the
might
person
go?
who
Tools
doesn't
needed best
can't afford
practice?
to pay the taxes.
You
doesn't
know,
have to have the
engagement
tax
tools?
increase.
Housing units, yeah.
Yeah, develop additional housing, okay.
I have one which I haven't heard mentioned, but I think is relevant, which is folks who have mental health issues often need a manager who is like a social worker.
Yeah,
And for that, we would need to link into Vancouver Coastal Health,
Yeah.
and they have programs
yeah.
for a manager who is a social worker.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's one of the things in Birch that's on my radar, is how can, if we can, and how to support something like that, and I think that's actually almost in the, is it in the get info? Like, we need to know what the needs are on Bowen and talk to Coastal
We need
Health.
to know what the needs are, we need to know what the programs are with Coastal Health, and
Yeah.
can we extend that over to Bowen Island?
So yeah, I'm not sure, is that get info tools needed? I feel like it's get info, like we need to investigate this, we need to research.
We do have an established connection there, and
Yeah.
Mark Lecition is the person who does a lot of the liaison.
Who's that?
Mark Lecition,
Okay.
and he does come here, yeah, and would be open to discussion.
Excellent.
Interesting to know how many community workers live off island, so teachers, etc.
Yeah, that would be an information.
Municipal staff.
That's, sorry, if we-
Yeah.
So we had one, Steve, you handed me this one, sewer water needs $2 on. So what is, do you want to just?
That's a big factor in terms of where our sewer and water systems are.
Yeah.
And whether it be for provincial taxpayer funded or whether it be private development, sewer and water is a big issue.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
So-
So I think we gotta understand, if we
That
had to lay out a
means-
map right now, ask everybody to put the sewer and water system on a map,
Yeah.
I doubt everybody could do it. Or I
Yeah.
doubt people could tell you how much a running foot does sewer and water pipe cost.
So research?
It's existing, right?
Yeah.
What the current capacities and connections are.
And the fees for connecting in the code.
Yeah,
So
that could
what
be
we have-
interesting.
Yeah.
That's how, I mean, yes, I think Steve raised the subject of essential infrastructure.
Yeah.
We all want
Broaden
to
it
do,
to infrastructure, I like that.
Yeah.
yeah,
essentially.
we've raised some things we want to do. Well, listen, it's going to be hindered greatly if we don't have the
Yeah.
basic infrastructure to support it.
Okay.
And I think it's a very interesting, and it's something I'm not an expert in, but it's,
Okay.
yeah.
Any
It's
more
the
management?
taxes one.
The taxes, okay. I'm wondering if that's,
Is that potential new taxes or what we can do?
you're proposing to raise taxes.
Yeah.
So maybe under tools needed or something like that, like, because so it's essentially could we use property taxes as a tool
It's a tool.
to fund? So I think that's under tools needed, is examining how property taxes or other taxes may be used to help support diverse housing. Is that?
Or Airbnb taxes.
Airbnb taxes, there's a bunch of
we
different options.
Also got gifted land.
Yeah,
So someone who owns, long time I had a large acreage, give half an acre at death,
yeah,
could put a small home up. It's not in our legal means to allow us to do it.
yeah. So I think that's definitely under tools needed, is examining.
Have you written that down,
those
Daniel?
options. Have you got any?
Bequeathment program.
Mhm.
I have
Okay,
one
yeah,
more, but it's not even on there.
that's okay.
Is it possible, once the staff have created a timeline, an implementation line, to actually make it a
I
visual?
was gonna say, once we do it. 'cause
Or you guys do it?
No, we as a committee
Okay, yes,
do
decide.
it.
Have a visual that's on a large piece of paper, so rather than just seeing it like this, you're able to see it as an actual roadmap. And say, how far along are we? What has to be done? So you've got this stage in the process. To get to that stage, you have to have done this, and this. So we can all see it.
I like the idea of that, and I think that in itself is a task, is a thing, is
Yes, it
a thing
And
to do,
this
an action item.
implementation chart that I just gave is just
Yeah.
a tool to get there.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you can understand what goes in what order and how long they take.
It's like the barometer showing how
So
much
I'm
money
just
is
with
raised.
that with goals and vision, because that's kind of we can retitle that, but that's about kind of our work and how are we gonna get there.
So we're all on the same page.
Yeah,
So
And back
that's-
to how are we going to measure success?
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Because
We have to articulate that.
When we
That's-
arrive at that place.
The municipal regional district tax.
Yeah, so the Airbnb
Recommend
tax
that we institute that.
to Affordable Housing Reserve
Yeah.
Fund, which I think is a great idea. So I'm wondering, where's,
It's a tool.
it's a tool?
Yeah.
Okay. Do that. Okay, any final, we're getting down to the wire? Yeah.
This doesn't fit
In one
anywhere.
time.
No, I think a quarter past would be ideal.
Quarter past, yeah, so we got
This
10
doesn't
minutes.
fit anywhere, but people
That's
are going
okay.
to think that it's something that we would do, which is to develop an understanding of the short-term vacation rentals.
Yeah.
And to have
I agree, I
related
think that's-
regulations.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, it comes maybe with the,
Yeah,
I think it's
it could be,
info.
it could be, it's,
The
let's
business
just put it
license
as
is
a little
another thing.
subheader.
and some of our
Talking about getting
zoning.
Because
information.
it is one very particular box,
Okay.
Want to
right?
touch upon the
It
zoning.
might be underneath, yeah, engagement or one of those things, but it is, I agree, I think it's something to be addressed.
I believe we have some very good bylaws, for example, that do cover what is a B&B, and we choose not to implement them. I would argue, because it comes from the point, Bowen Island's mentality is to protect the single-family homeowner. And that is the overriding concern of how we look at housing on Bowen.
Not this
I
committee,
think that's
though.
changing, yeah, I think
Not-
that's changing.
but it's the
Yes. It's a
it's the
traditional,
conservative
past
view of Bowen Island's people.
Yeah.
but we have a position
I
where
agree.
we have the authority to shift that.
And where I see the discussion of short-term rentals coming in is perhaps we as a committee can make recommendations. And you've done, I think, have done a lot of research already. We have done, so maybe it's just pulling together some research, new research. What are other committees doing? How could we think it? What do we think is a recommendation for Bowen? And that could be something that could help council. I think that's I think really
I
reasonable.
guess we could also, as a committee, put our minds to the issues that Josie Osborne identified. And
Yeah.
she reached one conclusion about the impact of short-term rentals given her community. It's quite possible that it could be different on Bowen.
Yeah,
You never know.
yeah, indeed it could.
Okay, any other last post-its that didn't make it up? No?
Is it relevant to ask from the floor whether there's...
Yeah, thank you. I
Anything
think
you'd like
actually
to say?
that was on my radar as well. Do any of the members of the public?
Tremendous.
No, but do you have any, are there any things you
Zoning.
think we've maybe missed?
Zoning.
Zoning? Add some emphasis to that one?
In reference to it, Daniel, it's-
Yeah, we did have it up there, examine the existing zoning, how maybe is that constraining the development of
Yeah,
diverse
but
housing?
Maybe you know this, but lots of this stuff has been done by the communities.
Yeah,
And the best recommendation I would like to encourage is, and I'll be more than happy to send you a few things, which I'll do anyhow. About some of the consultant reports that have been done for communities like Lumley, like Tofino, like Salt Spring. And
yeah,
because
just
it's,
research.
rather than,
Yeah.
there's a lot of energy here, but,
Yeah.
you know, at a weekend of reading, you
Mhm.
can felt pen out a fair amount of the stuff and kind of go with it.
Agreed,
Because
yeah.
you've got this huge basket
Mhm.
of what they're gonna try to take on. And really, what's gonna stop this thing is the process of what this island has the capability of producing in legislation, approvals and what have you.
Yeah,
And
And-
also making available we don't have a clear process right now.
yeah.
If I want to go design, if I got some backers who want to build some staff housing, how do I do that? If I was to send in something next week, who do I talk to? How do I choose which site? Or how do I know which sites are available? And what is the criteria that this island wants for me to meet?
Okay, right. And the other thing that's made me think of is too, like Bowen Island has, as a community, has a lot of reports and work done. You know, whatever it is, like 5 to 15 years ago, there was a lot of work done. There was like, you know, Robin who's here, was on committees, like there's been work done, whether it's all completely relevant today, but I'm sure some of it still very much is. So that's made me think, not that I want to create work for staff, but I'm sure we'll have a web page, we do already, we could have some resources and links to
Yeah.
various things, and maybe some of these reports can be there. So I think that's a lessons learned, reviewing those reports, looking at other comparator communities or how other people are achieving these things.
I think you were saying something else, which is for the developer, a very clear sense of what's the process to be able to...
For anybody, whether it be a
For anybody.
nonprofit, a developer, whatever.
Okay, so that's, I think, we need to get down
And just one other thing, and what's the role of the community lands?
Yes.
So I just want to bring up at this point, the new municipal website that started this year, the planning and development page does have a flow chart on there from bare land development idea to construction on the ground, all the steps that you follow. If there's any comments on how to improve that and how it's laid out and the information provided, we're working towards exactly what you're saying to make it easier for the user. And we also have community engagement with community lands and a web page that was designed specifically for that, that has a lot of information. Again, I don't know if.
The politics around housing is significant. That's why you've got community.
Yes, so you're saying something specific to housing for community lands?
Whatever, yeah, I mean, if that's, if it's, for example, leased land, then when your performance is gonna be, you know, you need that to complete your performance. As far as whether or not Dallas families would subdivide their, 80 acres, that's it, and go for rezoning, that's another issue, but they're right now, we don't.
I think
Yeah.
I'm going to try and pull this back
Yeah.
because
Thank you,
I'm
Michael.
looking
We've only
at
got 5 minutes.
as you're, yeah, you got, yes, fine.
According to yours, yeah, I'll go by the.
No, we're
5.
synchronized, we're synchronized. Just so
But there
you,
you
so,
go, yeah.
so we can effectively wrap up
Oh,
and not
great.
be drawn up in.
Yeah, agreed. So I think we've done, thank you so much. I think we've done great work. We have lots, and I can see Steph's been crazily. So we'll capture this in photos, and then we'll try to sort of create a digital document. Does anybody want to just quickly, are these, and we can revisit the titles of these. These are just quick loose themes. We've got, get information, so essentially research, what's the existing housing stock, what are some potential projects that are in the pipeline, those kinds of things, looking, maybe doing research to other communities and how things are done, best practices, lessons learned. We've got identifying needs and gaps, diverse housing, I like that, so examining, that can be a whole subject as to, you know, what are we missing, or what are the different options available, what do we want to promote, tools needed, as a municipality, goals and visions, which I think we could probably work on a little bit more as well in the future, and then engagement, so with the community, with various people, and I don't know if that's a good place for the short-term rentals, but.
Well, just an idea, we got a lot of stuff up there, and usually committees grind to a halt. So I'm wondering, with yourself, and whatever else you wanna do, is maybe take these for the next meeting and assign everybody one of these, because a lot of this is information gathering.
Yeah.
So if everybody got a duty, like a narrow thing, it's not like getting a PhD in it. And in the next agenda, maybe there's 6 items that the people report back on, like just some information things, one on the process, one on needs, one on provincial programs, one on something else. And so the committee members themselves feel like they're doing something, no disrespect to everybody, but everybody gets just a narrow research project you gotta do. And at the next meeting, it's your duty to take 10 or 15 minutes and pontificate on that issue. This is a thought.
Yeah, it
And
might
it won't cover everything, but at least you knock off a 6 or 8.
And it might be, because we do need to,
The councilors be by their campaigning, so let them
yeah,
off the hook.
yeah. So
Would it be
yeah, sorry.
Would it be possible, rather than have us all give a summary in the meeting, which would actually take quite a lot of time, that we all send out our information to everybody beforehand?
Sure, a summary of it, yep.
So a summary, do you think, of each kind of theme? Is that what we're
Not
talking
necessarily, I think it's just
Well, you
taking...
No, I agree with Elsa, I think she's just building on the same thing. So
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah.
we'll trust you, you look at this and pick out 6 things, or the
And
next
all
step
of
for
us
research.
do our own prioritization.
And you assign them,
Love
this
it.
person's better at that, that person's better at that, and you have to contact us all or email separately. And then we each have to prepare something on each topic, which Allison's saying, and send out a summary of what you're gonna yap about before you come to the show.
I like that idea. I think we're maybe one meeting too early. What I think I'd like to see is at next meeting, we prioritize these as a group. And I think what we could do, what I heard from Allison was, over the next month, we'll have this somehow digitized or available. We all maybe look at them and prioritize them ourselves, and then as a group, we come back together and prioritize them together.
I'm okay with that amendment.
Yeah? Well, just because if we all sort of like, okay, you're doing this and I'm doing that, we have to prioritize these at all. And I mean, if there's some low-hanging fruit and you want to do it in your own initiative, please do. Like, there's a few things that would probably be 1 or 2 hours worth of Googling and reading to bring back a little summary. If there's something in here that you're like, oh yeah, I really want to do that, please do and bring it to the meeting. Because we may be actually able to kind of streak off a few of the small, easy things. But I think overall, we should really, as a group, prioritize, like you said, figure out, because we're not going to be able to do all of this. It's about prioritizing them,
But
making
you know,
lists.
Robin, you also have to draw on the specific expertise of people. For
Agreed.
instance, there's certain things I feel I cannot be useful in, and other
Yes.
things I
I
can.
just want to
Yes.
throw in a planning comment. Just planning in general, that should make your work a lot easier and more focused. You have a lot of things in here, you don't want to get stuck in the weeds, and I've seen a lot of committees get stuck in the weeds and the details. I think you should spend your next meeting prioritizing your work plan, starting with your goals and visions.
Okay.
What exactly do you want to do? And then to create a baseline for where you're coming from, you should split up the research for information gathering. That's going to be a big part of your work that could be split up, and then decide how do you want to get there through this other stuff.
Thank you.
I agree. The only issue I worry about is if we wait until the next meeting, which is in October, and October is the time where we look for budgets as well. Will that...
I think we should be cautious about that. I mean, October is when you identify an initial month, and then there's roughly a 6-month process to get to the final. So it's not as if you have one cake at the can. But just that we should be thinking in terms of there's going to be costs associated with some of this, and you know, what might that be.
And I'll start that conversation with Raj or with staff, whoever's appropriate. I'll figure out and start that conversation and set that.
The other point is that between now and our next meeting, there's a lot of material that's flagged in the 2 reports that you've got. The one that's on the table is the more relevant for where we're at right now. We could spend all of our preparatory time just diving into some of that material rather than starting off on a research task where the research has actually already been done and consolidated. And I would like, at our next meeting, if we're identifying things where we need additional information, to really talk about how we're going to get that information, because there are all sorts of concerns about, you know, I mean, Googling is one thing, but you don't always get the best information by that source. There are some reliable sources of information that people can go to and come back and report, and we can be confident that you actually know what you're talking about.
So in the interest of wrapping up, I think that summarizes it perfectly. So I'm going to ask you over the next month, number one, to read. If you haven't read it yet, go through all of the sort of reference stuff, look back at reports that were done in the past. I think just read and get up to speed on what's been done in other places, and I think there's lots of links and lots of stuff. So, and then the next one, I think, come prepared for next meeting to discuss goals and vision for this committee, and then be prepared that we will dive into these and try to prioritize them. So whether you want to come prepared with priorities or just be familiar with what we've got up there and be ready to discuss it. But I agree. I think reading, getting ourselves up to speed with all the work that's been done, and let's all get ourselves all the way up there.
All these ideas will be sent out in the minutes.
Yeah. Great. Okay,
Thank
sorry,
you.
2 minutes late. Sorry.
You were. Robin, yes, just bouquets of thanks to Robin.
Yay.
Steve, and to Maureen and Steph for some of the preparations. And for all of you for giving up your time to be here. It's hugely appreciated.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you what a thrill it's been to be your chair for 30 minutes.
You had at least an hour in there. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for doing that.
Robin, thank you.
I just want to be sure.